John Kraft, second class radioman. I was in college for 2 years and did not take good advantage of what I was lucky to have. So that was 1966, and when I failed a very easy course, I decided that there must be something else. So I went down and I looked at the Air Force first, but my eyesight I was very nearsighted, and they wouldn't let me within 50 feet of an airplane. And I didn't want to be in the state of Kansas at some air base for 4 years, so I went down to my Navy recruiter. I joined up in September of 1966. I was from just west of Great Lakes boot camp, and that's where I went to boot camp. Became a squad leader. Thought I was hot stuff because I had 2 years of college and a high percentile on tests and so forth. Boot camp wasn't hard, it was just boring. You did the marching, you learned to, they shaved your head so that you looked like individuality was driven out of you. You were supposed to be a fighting unit, a team. Anyway, graduated from boot camp and reported aboard, sent to a destroyer, which I asked for because I had heard that smaller units ate better, something like that. It's the scuttlebutt that you hear. Reported aboard Christmas 1966 in Long Beach, California, to the Harry E. Hubbard, a destroyer, DD-748. It was miserable. It was foggy. It was hot bunking. We were assigned, and I went thinking, because I was hot stuff, I thought that I would get a school right away. I did not. I was sent to the fleet as a bosun's mate, a deck ape, and spent 3 months in the deck gang, where you get up a half hour before everybody else, sweep and swab the decks, shine the bright work, chip paint, and so forth. My Navy career would have been extraordinarily bad, probably not made rate because it was a frozen rate, but anyway, just before my buddy and I that went from boot camp to the Hubbard with me, in the March of 67, they were shorthanded in the radio shack. We got to know the communications officer, and just before we went to Westpac, Western Pacific, Vietnam, we were sent to the radio shack, and I got out of the deck gang. And as I say, God was looking out for me. The Harry E. Hubbard was totally unmodernized. It was just as it left the shipyards in 1943. And today, I subscribe to Navy Times and so forth, and you see the types of barracks that people have today. But you see the, quote, primitive conditions that sailors used to have. No privacy in the heads, just lines of commodes in a stainless steel trough, if you will. The Navy taught me to love food. I was a very picky eater until I hit the Navy, and then you had to eat whatever they put out. I never touched an egg before I hit the Navy. I learned to love eggs sunny side. I learned to love bug juice, whatever was out there, because on the destroyer, you would run out of fresh foods, and then you'd be getting powdered milk and so forth. But we were led by a tremendous skipper, P.R. Bush, commander. I would have gone to war with him. He was very, very seamanship savvy. Because of being a radioman, you had to take messages to the officer. You were in officer's country in the wardroom quite a bit, and you got to see various people calling the shots, if you will. And I would have followed P.R. Bush into war. I would have been glad to. His seamanship and handling of the ship was second to none. The Hubbard itself was very old. We pulled into the Philippines with a hole in our fantail. We used diesel fuel excessively, so much so that it was embarrassing to the captain. When we were coming back to Pearl from Westpac, we couldn't keep up with our sister ship, the Samuel N. Moore 747, because we just used too much oil and we had to cut back on our knots and so forth. The Hubbard afforded me to see the tail end of a typhoon when we pulled out the port, and again, Bush was really savvy. We hit extremely high waves and rolls, and I remember his his comment when he was on the bridge, leave her there and see how she handles, you know. And he was smart enough. We pulled back into port for a day until the typhoon subsided or went further away before we pull out. I credit the success that the Hubbard had. We were known as the fastest guns in the West because of our accuracy and support of the Marines and Army on the beach when we would fire our 5-inch guns to support what they were doing there on operations against the Viet Cong. Really opened my eyes to different ways of life, Hong Kong, Japan, and so forth. We provided plane guarding for the aircraft carriers operating off the coast of Vietnam. We gunfire support for the Marines or the Army that would call in coordinates, and then at night H&I harassment and interdiction missions and so forth. Was there from March of '67 to September '67 when they sent me to radio school. I received a letter of commendation for the work I did as an untrained radioman. From radio school in San Diego, then I applied for submarines.